Today, we're going to tackle a piece of law that sounds really complex but is super important for so many families, the Hindu Succession Act. Think of it as a rule book, but one written in its own special language. And by the time we're done here, you'll be speaking it fluently. So, let's start with a very real question that honestly is way more common than you'd think. What actually happens to a person's assets, their property, their stuff, if they pass away without leaving a will? Who gets to decide? It's not just a free-for-all. There's actually a plan, a legal framework for exactly this situation. And that framework is the Hindu Succession Act. This is the official rule book. But here's the thing. Before you can really understand the rules, you have to learn the vocabulary. And when you look at these original source notes, you can see just how much this law is built on very, very precise definitions. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the rules of the game. Then, we'll get into how the law defines your family tree and how to trace your lineage. We'll even cover the specifics of blood relationships. And it all builds up to the most important question, why does any of this language even matter? All right, let's dive right into part one. Before we can even begin to figure out who gets what, we need to understand the situation itself and who the players are. These first two terms we're about to cover are the absolute bedrock of this entire act. And for that, we're going straight to the source material. You can see right here in these notes the definition for the word that kicks this whole process off. That word is intestate. It describes the exact scenario that puts this entire law into motion. So what does intestate mean? It's actually pretty simple. It just means a person died without making a will. That's it. That's the trigger. When that happens, their property doesn't just vanish. The law has to step in and distribute it based on a clear set of rules. And who gets the property? Well, they're called an heir. An heir can be a man or a woman, and they're simply the person who the law says gets to inherit from someone who died intestate. So you've got intestate, that's the situation, and heir, that's the person who inherits. These two concepts are the foundation for everything else. Okay, so we've got our basic terms down. Now let's see how the law actually starts to categorize family members. You can think of it like we're drawing a family tree, but every single branch has a very specific legal label. So the law basically looks at your family line in two main directions, the people who came before you and the people who will come after you. And of course, it has legal terms for both, ascendants and descendants. And honestly, it's pretty intuitive. Ascendants are the people you ascend up your family tree to find, your parents, your grandparents, and so on. Descendants are the people you descend down the tree to find, your children, your grandchildren. Simple, right? But this distinction is absolutely crucial in the eyes of the law. So you might be wondering, what about everybody else? Your brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, where do they fit in? Well, the law calls them collaterals. They're called that because while you share a common ancestor, they aren't directly above or below you. They're on parallel or kind of sideways branches of the family tree. Okay, this next part is maybe the most critical and sometimes confusing part of all this. It's not just who you're related to that matters, but how you're related. And this brings us to two really important words, agnate and cognate. Looking back at the source notes, we can see the definitions right here. The entire difference between these two terms, the whole thing, boils down to one single question. Is there a female on the line of relation that connects two people? So here's the breakdown. An agnate is a relative who is connected to you only through a line of men. The second a female ancestor appears anywhere in that chain of relatives, boom, that person is now a cognate. It seems like a tiny detail, but it has huge implications for who gets to inherit. Let's use some examples to make this crystal clear. Your brother, he's an agnate, since the link is through your father. Your brother's son, also an agnate. But now, here's the one that sometimes trips people up. Your father's mother is also considered an agnate. You might be thinking, but wait, she's a woman. But remember, it's all about the path. The path from you to her goes through your father, who is a male. That's the key. And a law gets even more specific. It doesn't just stop at lineage. It also drills down into the nature of the parental bond, especially between siblings, like whether they share both parents or just one. As you can see from the notes here, the law breaks this down into three distinct categories: full blood, half blood, and uterine blood. Each one describes a very specific family scenario, so let's walk through them one by one. First up, full blood. This one's the easiest. It's exactly what it sounds like. It describes siblings who have the same mother and the same father.
Next, we have half-blood. This term is used to describe siblings who share the same father but have different mothers.
And finally, there's uterine blood, which is pretty much the reverse of half-blood. This is for siblings who have the same mother but different fathers. The word uterine, of course, refers to the womb, their common link.
Okay, let's just pause for a second. We have just gone through a whole bunch of legal jargon. Intestate, heir, ascendant, descendant, agnate, cognate, full blood, half-blood. It's a lot. And you have to be asking yourself, why? What is the point of being so incredibly specific?
Well, the answer is actually very straightforward. It's because every single one of these definitions is a building block in a legal hierarchy. They all exist for one reason and one reason only: to create a clear, undeniable pecking order for who inherits property when there isn't a will.
And this is the result. This is what it all builds towards. The Act creates different classes of heirs. Class 1 heirs are at the very top of the list. If there's no one in Class 1, the law then moves down to Class 2. If there are no Class 2 heirs, then it looks for agnates. And only after all of that does it finally move to the cognates. You see, all that language we just learned creates this precise ladder of inheritance. So, there you have it. You now know the essential vocabulary of the Hindu Succession Act. You understand the language that the law itself speaks. So the real question is, now that you know the words, are you ready to learn the rules of the game?